Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris, BlueRaven at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And we are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And you are listening to Studio A. And my special guest this evening is James Bartley. And James Bartley has investigated alien abductions, and particularly reptilian abductions and military abductions, for over 20 years. James is a protege of legendary alien abduction researcher Barbara Bartholic. James is an independent historian with an emphasis on intelligence, counterintelligence, and special operations. He is a student of military history from antiquity to modern times and has made an in-depth study of the military-industrial financial security complex which developed after World War II. And James personally investigated numerous reptilian abduction cases and military abduction cases in the high desert of Southern California. The high desert of Southern California is where the deep black aerospace industry is located, as well as military installations which figure prominently in UFO and Milab research, such as Edwards Air Force Base and Naval Weapons Center China Lake. He is familiar with much of the UFO military underground and undersea base activity in Southern California, Northern California, Arizona, and Nevada. And his website is www.theuniversalseduction.com/Bartley. And it is with great pleasure I welcome James to the show tonight. He's been on my show before, and I just love having him on. And James, you with me?
Yes, Solaris. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining us this evening. I really appreciate you being on tonight. And how are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm really looking forward to this show. It's always a treat for me to come on here. Good vibes from you. You're extremely knowledgeable. You have a really switched-on audience, and I always get a kick out of coming on your show, probably more than any other show.
Awesome.
So thank you once again.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to kind of open the floor for you insofar as what you'd like to discuss tonight. I know it's kind of a strange world we live in these days. It seems to me like we should call this show As the World Burns, because there's so much going on. It's
this
insane.
Is true.
You know, so I'd like to get your impression of what you see from day to day, and also wherever you want to go with this conversation as well.
Well, thank you very much, Solaris. One of the things I'd like to talk about first is something that I have observed in the UFO field, as well as within the alien abductee community, i.e. those people who have had actual encounters with non-human entities of one stripe or another. Now, there are tiers of gatekeeping, and there's a lot of self-censorship going on within the UFO research community. Mm-hmm. Now, we see this to a degree in what I call surface-level research, right? The Agenda 21 and the multinational corporations, so on and so forth. There's this desperate need to seek the approval of the lamestream and try to appear credible. So oftentimes what happens in the surface world is researchers, activists will bite on information that's put out that was meant to water down the whole story, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't realize that by biting on a small part of the big lie, they basically wind up swallowing the whole lie. And this has a knock-on effect with people that are still unaware of all this stuff going on, even in the surface. Mm-hmm. I point that out because I see that all the time in the UFO community. For example, we see this shame-based need to seek the approval of the lamestream, to seek the approval of those gatekeepers in particular who are steeped in the bogus science. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, those people that have had the actual encounter experiences in all its different facets, astral experiences, psychic, telepathic experiences, astral dreamscape experiences, physical encounters, so on and so forth, some of them that have this shame-based wounded inner child, in a desperate need to seek approval and acceptance, they water down their own experiences. Mm-hmm. And they focus, at least outwardly, on just about any aspect of the ET UFO phenomenon except their own ET experiences. In fact, a lot of them don't even want to delve into the subject of alien encounters, alien abductions, because of all these unresolved issues of trauma, fear, embarrassment, whatever the case may be. So that is self-censorship, and I see this happening all the time, where these people that have fallen into this pattern, they wind up trying to impose their beliefs on others. Like, for example, someone will get some really good video of a UFO, for example, and then the person who is already practicing self-censorship on themselves, and there are many UFO researchers out there who are what I call closet case abductees. I know, just looking at them, feeling their vibe, looking at the trauma in their eyes, that they've had alien abduction experiences, but instead they focus all their efforts on crop circles, on cattle mutilations, basically anything other than the abduction experience itself. Mm-hmm. So what they do is, when others try to break out of that mold, they try to reel them back in. It's a form of programming, and it's part and parcel of this whole archontic reptilian control system. The person will say things like, well, that's a really interesting looking video, but why don't you send it off first to this scientifically oriented researcher who has all the photo software and is very objective, et cetera, and let's have him, usually it's a him, vet it first before you put it up on YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. And that is just one example of this gatekeeping, right? Right. And then it expands further than that, where somebody who has had a variety of alien abduction experiences, alien encounter experiences, which aren't abductions, but are kind of like meetings with aliens. There's all kinds of different types, as you know. Mm-hmm. They find themselves surrounded by these people that are steeped in the bogus science, and they're heavily left brain orientated, and they're steeped in the empirical reductionist kind of bogus science. So they feel inhibited talking about their own experiences. And yet they persist in going to these UFO groups, so-called, that are basically run by all these people steeped in the faux bogus science. And the topics of discussion typically tend to be astronomy and things like that. Once in a while, it delves into lights in the sky, right? Lights in the sky research. And the reason the gatekeepers of varying stripes overemphasize the lights in the sky research is because it conveniently keeps the subject of UFOs and ETs at an arm's length. It's non-confronting that way. It's interesting videos, interesting eyewitness reports, but ultimately it's a will-o'-the-wisp transient phenomenon, nothing you could really sink your teeth into. Mm-hmm. And that's why these gatekeepers steeped in the bogus science, that's why they emphasize the lights in the sky approach, and that's why those guys, typically males, tend to run these scientifically oriented UFO groups. So along comes these people that have actually had the encounter experiences. They've actually been on board the craft. They've actually interacted with a number of different types of ETs at all different levels, telepathic, psychic, so on and so forth. And then they have to sit there and feel shame-based and embarrassed about talking about their own experiences. And when they muster up the courage to talk about their experiences, they realize by the frosty, hostile reception that their viewpoints and their perspective are not welcome, right? Mm-hmm. So it's bad enough that goes on in a lot of these MUFON-type groups, these scientifically oriented groups. But when that mindset persists within like support groups that are supposedly made up of people that have had the actual encounters, alien encounters, so on and so forth, that's when it really becomes a problem. Because as I said at the outset, there's tiers of gatekeeping. There's different levels of it. Mm-hmm. And what happens within the battleground known as the Alien Abduction Support Group meeting is you have these factions develop, these people that I call the false positives, these people who only want to talk about pleasant experiences and who look disdainfully upon others who describe traumatic or negative experiences. They regard people that describe such experiences as vibrationally challenged and spiritually retarded, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of those, that mindset itself is based on programming, right? Because they themselves, I've never met anyone who's only purely had positive experiences, because those individuals that outwardly remember encounters with benevolent beings, spiritually oriented beings, and there are Arcturians, there are Palladians that are very spiritually orientated. Mm-hmm. Almost invariably, those people wind up in a cosmic tug of war between negative aliens and good aliens, right? That's just the way it is. So what often happens is the negative aliens install programming so they don't remember or don't want to remember or don't even want to hear about anything negative. Mm-hmm. It's a triggered response, and they have all these obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD feedback loops, which turn into an echo chamber in their mind, where when a lot of these false positives get together, they just endlessly repeat the same new age cliches about how this planet is a school, we're here to learn, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is when those types do get triggered, they go from love and lighter a moment ago to the claws come out, and they say and they do things that are completely at variance with the whole concept of love and light, especially how they castigate and they demean and insult people that remember negative experiences. So within this alien abduction support group setting, you have the false positives and you have the people that remember a lot of negative experiences and want to work through all that trauma, right? Mm-hmm. So what I've come across in the recent past is there's this group of reptilian human hybrids out there. They call themselves reincarnated good reptilians from the Tau Ceti star system. I've met more than one now, so it's now a pattern, right? Mm. And what these guys do, typically once again as guys, they sit in these abductee support group meetings, and the moment someone starts mentioning anything about negative experiences, they jump all over that person and start saying things like, why are you saying things that are scaring the other people? Like they would presume to know what everyone else wants or needs to hear. They would presume to be the thought police and the emotions police. Mm-hmm. Why are you saying things that are scaring the other people? Because the information you're sharing is so scary. It's so scary, right?
Elmer.
Yeah. And then they start persecuting the person and making all these accusations about them being spiritually unevolved, vibrationally challenged, whatever the euphemism is, right? Mm-hmm. And so eventually, inevitably, what happens is a support group, especially if the facilitator does not keep a firm grasp of what's going on, does not keep firm control of what's going on, inevitably what happens is a support group breaks up into factions where you have the false positives huddling in their corners and whispering, about how spiritually unevolved the other faction is, right? And in the past, what myself and some of my colleagues have had to do is when we facilitated a large alien encounter group and these factions developed, we had to create a smaller support group of what we call hardcore cases, people that were Milabs, people that were reptilian abductees who wanted to share the hardcore information and who did not get triggered, right? Because those people, like the Tau Cetians, right, let's say, the good reptilians from Tau Ceti, they are programmed themselves. Oftentimes they're reprogrammed the night before an encounter support group meeting. And they're programmed to become triggered when all these negative subjects come up, right? Mm-hmm. And so, again, if there are not a lot of strong-willed people on the other side of the equation, those people that remember negative experiences, want to work through the trauma, if some of those people are shame-based, and we're all shame-based to one degree or another, they may knuckle under, and they may say to themselves or say to the false positives, yes, okay, They start to compromise. Okay, I won't talk about that stuff because it's so upsetting and so scary to others, right? Mm-hmm. And see, what bugs me about this, what really irks me, is that the alien abduction syndrome has a disastrous effect on the family unit, and extending outwards to friends also, where the negative aliens can not just manipulate family members to be hostile or negative when the subject matter comes up. Many of the people in one's family are abductees anyway. They're either in denial, or the programming with them it has been so embedded that they just knee-jerk response, reject any suggestion about aliens, don't even want to hear the subject. So what happens is you have these people with largely shame-based inner wounded children, a wounded inner child, and they're not comfortable talking about these subjects in group. Within their own family, it's a taboo subject. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, their own children are being abducted. Meanwhile, their own children are afraid to sleep with the lights off, and they're going around closing all the doors in the house, acting all obsessive compulsive. They're developing all these phobias of spiders and clowns and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, these false positives huddle there, amongst themselves, feeling that they hold the high moral ground. And I'll just wrap this part up by saying that it's important for people to break away from that, because otherwise you're going to resonate at their lower vibration. Mm-hmm. They're essentially fear-based, triggered programmed vibration, where certain subjects are taboo. We must keep everything in this false positive light. And healing cannot come about that way. Reintegration cannot come about that way. Dredging up memories in a safe manner and developing healing as a result cannot come about that way, because the false positives want to make everything to do with the UFO subject positive and spiritual, which is very much like putting the cart before the horse, mm-hmm. right? There has to be a lot of internal work first before one can decide, okay, I'm going to maintain my inner harmony despite whatever is going on around me, or with, so on and so forth. So, and the default setting is just to hunker down, not want to make any waves, not want to trigger the false positives, so their claws don't come out and they keep them retracted, right? Mm-hmm. And then also, before I switch subjects, what I also see in the UFO community at large, first of all, it still is steeped in patriarchy. Most of the big name researchers are invariably males, and they talk about anything except the encounters themselves. Right. They tend to stick to things that are acceptable to the lamestream, and you routinely invoke the bogus science, which you and I know is complete and utter nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And they're not test pilots, James. A lot of them aren't test pilots for the technology and the experience as an abductee.
Yes. If I had a choice of sitting and talking with some big shot researchers steeped in the bogus science and has all the hits on their websites and is a regular feature in the talk show circuit, were they even to deign to talk to someone like me, right? Or on the other hand, talk to somebody who's had these experiences all the time, 100%. I will always talk to the people that have had the ET experiences, have been undergone the mind control, undergone the various types of experience, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. That's where all the information is.
You bet. Okay. Absolutely.
But instead, it's the reductionist, empirical, bogus science types that still, to this day, hold the upper hand in the UFO field. So that's why, more than ever, time is of the essence. I can't stress that enough. Time is of the essence. Time literally is speeding up, because time, as we understand it, is merely a frequency. Mm-hmm. People need to detach from all of that, because I see things in the UFO community. Okay, person A over here is I know is a legitimate researcher. Person B that they're talking to, I know, is a debunker and a gatekeeper. Yet the two of them are there buddying up and laughing it up, and it's all just like a gentleman's club, right? Where there are no differences between them. And I would beg to differ, because the gatekeeper / debunker is the outward physical manifestation of this whole wretched control system. So why would one want to interact with someone, give away their energy to someone like that?
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, it's sabotage.
It's self-sabotage, and it's a form of self-censorship and gatekeeping. There's this weird, also, one last thing about this subject, there's a weird disconnect that a lot of UFO researchers, mostly these ones steeped in the bogus lamestream science, there's this weird syndrome that many of them have, and that is although on the one hand they research and lecture about UFOs and write about UFOs, and you and I know there's a massive cover-up, but on the other hand, these same people, they hew closely to the official big lies of the day. Whatever the popular status meme going on in the surface world and through the lamestream media, i.e., Russia is reigniting the Cold War, this, that, the other, right? Fear, 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 give away more of your rights, right? A lot of these UFO researchers fall right into line with that. And I'll just give you one example. George Filer, I'm a subscriber to Filer's Files, and he does have a lot of good information about current sightings and whatnot. And for those who don't know, if memory serves, George Filer was an Air Force officer at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey in, I believe, 1978, when it was swarmed over by a number of low-flying UFOs, one of which deposited an alien near the runway. Actually, it got onto the runway, ran along the runway until it was gunned down by MPs. And then this retrieval team flew in from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Blue Beret so-called, cratered up the ET body and hauled it off back to Wright-Pat. And George Filer, many years after the fact, admitted that he was at the base at a time and was aware of that incident happening. So kudos to him for coming forth with that information. But on the other hand, mixed in with his Filer's Files UFO updates is a lot of status memes, which are being promoted by Fox News, CNN, C-SPAN, whatnot. I just wish these guys would just stick to the UFO part of the equation. Just stick to what they know, what their particular bailiwick is within the UFO subject, and stop proselytizing, stop pushing these status control freak memes, which they may not even be aware they're doing this, right? It's just because, especially for those ex-military types, because again, it's all just OCD thought loops. They're just so used to living and thinking in hierarchical terms where the master authority figures are always right, which, again, there's a built-in contradiction to that, because Filer himself was at Fort Dix McGuire Air Force Base when they came and hauled away the alien body and a big cover-up ensued. So if they know that there's a UFO cover-up coming on and they've experienced it firsthand in some cases, it's why do they hew so closely to these status control freak memes and propaganda that's being excreted by the corporate media? There's a weird disconnect there. I only see this in the UFO field, right? So, well, enough about that. And the next theme I want to talk about is this is a frequency war, and in a last-ditch, desperate effort, in my opinion, the reptilian overlordship, our content-controlling powers that be, are trying to reinstall, further embed patriarchy all across the board. And the way that they've done this speaks volumes about just how they think, their inhuman consciousness, what they've done via a combination of unlimited immigration and also by covertly raising, training, funding, supplying, and in many cases with the help of cutouts like private mercenary firms, so on and so forth, and black op units. They've unleashed hordes of Wahhabist, Salafist, jihadists on the whole Western world. And then on the other hand, they've installed all these faux hate crime laws, right, to make it basically a crime to even identify the race, creed, and color of a perpetrator, assailant, whatever the case may be. So what's happening is, and what the way I see it, Solaris, is I see it as the witch hunts 2.0. When you look back at the witch hunts, which lasted centuries, and conservatively, a lot of historians say tens of thousands, some say hundreds of thousands. I would say closer to millions of females, old women, elderly women, adult women, and young girls were ruthlessly and systematically slaughtered. Their judges, their juries, their prosecutors, their accusers were almost invariably males, right? And what we saw in Europe was misogyny, patriarchy on steroids. And this was driven in itself by this reptilian overlordship, this reptilian archontic influence, because the latter know very well that as human beings, our divine feminine self is where our power is. It's where our telepathy is. It's where our astral abilities is. It's where our intuitive connection to divine source is. So on the one hand, they foisted alphabet language on us, shunted us into the left brain, scribes, laws, priesthoods that enforce laws, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other half of that demonic equation was to go after and systematically eradicate women in general. And in the process, they got rid of all kinds of herbalists, all kinds of women who practiced the old craft, nature worship, working with energy, working with nature, so on and so forth, and just women in general. Elderly widows with property, with no surviving family, were ideal targets because they got rid of them and then they took all their property. So, and this lasted for centuries. Now, fast forward to today, and we see all these Wahhabists turn loose, and they bring their Sharia law with them. And so now what's happening is native-born white women in the West are like getting attacked, gang raped, acid splashed on their faces. But to say that, the assailants, they were these like Muslims from Southeast Asia, they were from they were like from this Arab community or that Arab community. Well, that's a hate crime, right? And so, like, take for example what recently emerged in the UK, where for like over 12 years or longer, there was this child sex ring made up largely of Pakistani male Muslims who were systematically going around kidnapping all these young white English girls and gang raping them, murdering them, et cetera, et cetera. And social workers actually found out about this years ago because the children that managed to survive and escape or escape this ordeal, they all, as one voice, came forward and said, yes, they are these, Muslims from Pakistan and these other places, but in a form of probably equal parts self-censorship because they knew better, or they didn't have enough integrity to take on the system. A lot of these social workers kept this vital intel to themselves, and also gatekeeping within those social services and the larger bureaucracies in general, because it's all part and parcel of the agenda to completely fragment society by turning loose hordes of these Sharia women-hating, vicious women-hating Muslims on society.
Right.
And now we have situations like in Scandinavia. It's like they're going around in packs and just attacking white women, happening in the UK, France, where Muslims just went berserk and just torched France from one end to the other several years back. And that's all part and parcel of this archontic agenda. So what we're seeing, the long and the short of it, is it's a last-ditch desperate effort to foist patriarchy, the extreme, harsh patriarchy, which harkens back to the witch hunts in Europe, which lasted for centuries. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I totally agree with you, and it's very it's more than disturbing, because you think with society today and our technology that we would have been advanced not only in our technology but in consciousness. But I do see it, and for America, of course, our borders are wide open, which means it's not just about little Mexican kids coming over, but it's about infiltrators coming over who are basically not, potential terrorists that could do harm. Now, American women are pretty tough, and I'll tell you point blank, we're not going to put up with that kind of crap. So, obviously it's going to be a real nasty little bloodbath if they start that garbage over here, and not acceptable in any form or design. But yet we have people in D.C. who are supporting that agenda. And I think that's what's so frustrating, James, is because we don't have a backup. We've got people in D.C. who are literally allowing this like the Trojan horse.
Yes, and allowing it to happen, and basically rendering or trying to render the populace at large defenseless in the process. So hordes of these people are being allowed in open, porous borders. And this also plugs into this other fear meme that's being pushed nowadays too, the whole pandemic kind of thing, the whole contagion outbreak meme. And the public has been systematically hammered with this meme via predictive programming in movies, I Am Legend, World War Z, Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman, so on and so forth. So it's firmly embedded, not just in the subconscious, but in the conscious minds of others, and also all the memes that go along with it, quarantines, enforced vaccinations, so on and so forth. So all of that is going on too, and so just to complete the thought about the whole the weird pathologies that I see within the UFO community, it's upsetting to me, and it's just irksome to me to see these people who were supposed to be truth tellers in the UFO community, who were supposed to be able to see past all through all the lies, without even realizing it, or sometimes I believe they do realize it. They keep pushing these status control freak memes, and they're supposed to be truth tellers. They're supposed to be paradigm busters, right?
Right.
So what we're seeing is as time goes on, like this state of entropy where things outwardly appear to be getting more and more out of control, more and more fragmented, more and more disharmonious. So it's important that we, those of us who've had these experiences, and in all its manifestations, people that have had mind control, targeted individuals, alien abduction experiences, Milab experiences, et cetera, to just really go within, detach from people who are not supportive in any way, because time is of the essence. And if we allow ourselves to be inhibited by people who are supposed to be our friends, supposed to be our support group, and they keep doing this to us, well, more and more time is going to pass, and then pretty soon we're going to find ourselves behind the 8 ball. So, but before I shift gears, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I totally agree with you. Like I said, I mean, everything that you're mentioning, I totally resonate with. And I do think that you're right. It's a practice non-attachment is my motto, literally. Breaking orbit with people that are non-productive and things like that. I mean, I've been doing that. If you watch my Facebook page, I flush people out quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's nothing personal. It's just that, I just don't need the extra drama and the extra disconnect, because and that's exactly what's going on. We have people that are not in resonance. We have people that are playing the hypocrite card. And, coming where I come from with the benchmark of the covert technology, I mean, I just don't have time and the illusion of time to mess with that. So I do think it's time for people to really start, filtering out things and filtering out their relationships with others. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And it's good that you mentioned that, because I've been watching you do that on Facebook, and I'm very I'm very careful who I let onto my Facebook friends list. I'm sure some trolls have slipped through the cracks, but generally, unless I know the person, I seldom add males because males tend to be trolls. Males tend to be easily triggered. Because I have a lot of females, a lot of female spiritual warriors in various stages of recovery and reintegration, and many of them are in the process of learning to speak their truth and being bold with their truth. Well, I don't want any male trolls, misogynists, every last one of them, to be triggered into saying patronizing, marginalizing, demeaning things to the women on my Facebook friends list, because I see my Facebook friends list as a sanctuary for people, males and especially females, who've endured all kinds of trauma and hardship and heartache. Right? It's a place for healing where they could speak their truth and be bold with it. I don't want all these weakling males, misogynists, getting triggered, because all male trolls fit a psych profile of being a misogynist, shame-based, hate-filled individual. Right? Mm-hmm. In fact, the very loathsomeness makes them useful to as a troll. It's probably their only vocation they could ever be good at, right? Mm-hmm. So I definitely practice vibrational and spiritual hygiene on my Facebook page. So that's also important. What I also see on Facebook, and this happens on the internet in general, is that many women, and I'm probably repeating myself, certainly others that have listened to me in other shows have heard me say this, but it bears repeating that sadly in our archontically controlled world, the latest statistics I've heard, something like 3 out of 4 women at some point in their life, oftentimes beginning in childhood, have been physically, emotionally, and or sexually abused. Oftentimes, more than once. And some of them have not healed enough yet to have developed strong psychological boundaries. So when they're putting out stuff on Facebook and suddenly, the lurking troll strikes and they're heaping all this scorn and abuse and making all these patronizing comments to the woman, what often happens, I've observed, is that the woman locks up because she hasn't pushed and moved all this blocked traumatic energy within her, because she's too shame-based to set up even like adequate psychological boundaries. She'll sit there and just allow this troll to just heap all kinds of scorn and abuse on her, comment after comment after comment, and it shuts down the woman because she's locked up, and it dead ends a conversation, which is the ultimate goal of the troll and the troll's masters. So what I like to see, what I would like to see is more women just simply blocking, unfriending, whatever the case may be. But the programming that's been installed in these women is such that oftentimes they can't even bring themselves to block or unfriend. I mean, think about that. Think about what a simple effort that is, to just move the mouse, point and click. Right. But that's the nature of this archontic controlled society we're at. Do we have to go into a break anytime soon?
We have a little bit more time here, but I did want to make one quick point. I know you're right about that, but the one thing, coming from the martial arts arena where I come from as a black belt, I will tell you, if you're a female out there and you feel that, you need to get into a martial arts program point blank, because that is the most empowering thing they can do, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that will also give them that, the overdrive to kick in where they can defend themselves in a situation, whether it's through the internet or actually physically. So that's just something I wanted to bring up.
Sage advice, especially now when society threatens to come apart at the seams. Women can't expect males to stick up for them or be there for them, whatnot, because the police are a bunch of rabid reptiles that are just as likely to attack the women as they would protect them. In fact, the thought of them actually doing their jobs nowadays is so outlandish, right? Mm-hmm. So women really need to practice martial arts that will help them with the self-discipline, that will help distill their mind. It will help them to reintegrate and develop that whole holistic mind-body kind of dynamic, get it all going again. Mm-hmm. And then reconnect them with divine source. So that's a great idea. I'd really encourage women to do that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things before we go onto our break is it's going to lead into the next part of my interview here is the breakaway civilization, as Richard Dolan aptly refers to it, because it leads into what I'm going to talk about next.
Okay, well, we have about 10 minutes, I would say, plus or minus before the break.
Good.
So, yeah.
So I could kind of lay the groundwork.
Sure, yeah.
And at the outset, what I should say is that the Roswell case is the case that makes the case. And a lot of people out there, I guess they're so jaded by now, they roll their eyes, always talking about Roswell. Yes, Roswell. Roswell was not the first crash retrieval of a real alien spacecraft, and it certainly hasn't been the last. But it's the best, most well-documented case with literally over 100 first and second-hand witnesses, not just at one base, but at a number of bases, because the alien bodies, the wreckage, the technology was transported to a number of different installations. So there are people in these other installations where the material came into who also remember aspects of the crash retrieval, the receipt of the technology, the attempted analysis of the technology, the back engineering of the technology. And Roswell is an important starting point because people out there have to understand that with the acquisition of alien technology in the form of crash retrievals, and then later with actual ongoing interactions with this, that, or the other ET race, the exchange and the transference of alien technology to deep black elements of the military aerospace community, the understanding of the breakaway civilization vis-a-vis physics, metallurgy, chemistry, propulsion, so on and so forth, is vastly different from what is taught in the universities. So this is why I have no patience with people who invoke the lamestream, bogus, Rothschild, Rockefeller, bought and paid for reptile science. I do not give those people any credence, and it's all I could do to just be cordial to them, right? The understanding of physics, of the cosmos, of our origins, of the true history of this planet and humanity, whether it's humanity 2.0, 3.0, whatever the case may be, the understanding within the breakaway civilization is radically different than what it is in the surface world. And we must remember that as project people, as alien abductees, we must never lose sight of the fact that we are multidimensional. Those of us that have had alien abduction encounters, many of you out there, you know that when you've been in an alien environment, be it a craft, alien installation, a very large mother craft, you know that in their exposed to their energy fields, exposed to their technology, exposed to whatever frequency or plane of existence they happen to be in at any one time, that alien abductees at times within that alien environment manifest what we would refer to as metaphysical or superhuman abilities, i.e. ability to levitate, walk through walls, walk through seemingly solid objects, interface at instantaneous speed with alien technology, telekinesis, generating energy from their own energy field, from their hands, so on and so forth. And as you know, Solaris, being a mystical scientist yourself, these are all things that seers, mystics, sages, shamans, shamanesses, medicine women have known throughout the ages. There's things that they know that is inherent within us as human beings. It's just that we've been so detuned from our connection to divine source, so detuned from our own understanding, of the real understanding of science and physics and how we interact with all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, interference has been run for sure. Without a doubt, that's the whole problem. We have interference being run on a frequency level to disrupt the natural flow of what we can access normally, on the cellular level. Of course, beings like us can access it, but a lot of other people have a difficult time.
Yes, and it cycles back to what I talked about at the outset. It's those people that have had ET encounters that manifest a variety of metaphysical abilities, you folks are just spinning your wheels when you're hanging around shame-based abductees who only want to talk about crop circles or some other safe topic, or also only want to bring you to these pointless UFO groups where the lamestream steeped, bogus steeped scientist types hold sway in these UFO groups, because you are denying yourself. You are essentially lying to yourself, right? So get away from those people and start going within. And what will happen as time goes by is you will gradually begin to meet other people like yourselves. And I know I've been there. I know you've been there, Solaris. At times, this can be a very lonely road. Mm-hmm. At times, we seem to be like a voice in the wilderness, and like we have no one to rely on except ourselves. And that's part of the deceit. That's part of the manipulation, where we're made to think we're cut off from divine source. Mm-hmm. We have to learn how to be content in our solitude at times. We have to learn to be content with our solitude and with quiet time and being detached from others and whatever energies that others bring to the table. And then when we reintegrate and we begin the healing process, and it's still a work in progress for me, then we can begin to interact with others who are of like vibration, but we won't do so from a shame-based, wounded inner child perspective. We won't do so from this standpoint of having to seek the approval of others and being codependent and being needy, right? Mm-hmm. And coming up with all these ways of achieving and receiving, psychological strokes which are unhealthy and self-destructive. So I think for now that's a good thing that we can kind of segue into the break with, because I've got a lot of stuff to share about Milabs and
excellent
the breakaway civilization when we get back.
Well, that'll be great. I think we're going to have a break in like 4 minutes or so. But there is one thing I do want to mention real quick, and we can think about this during the break. But, I talked to Mark Snyder a little bit about this earlier off air, but I'm under the impression that we're dealing with two worlds right now, eclipsing each other simultaneously, with separate realities happening that are almost having a parallel bleed-through effect between each other. And also, it's almost like there's a merge between the same space-time configuration. I don't know if you have any impression of that or not, or if you've actually tuned into that or not, but that's what I've been picking up.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
But before we run out of time in this segment, let me point out an example. Some of the Milabs that I know that are in these time travel, alternate timeline, alternate reality programs, what's been happening to them is these other realities, these other parallel realities and timelines, they're bleeding through into the regular world. Like this one friend of mine, he could be laying down in his bed, and then suddenly he'll look over and he's not in his bedroom anymore. It's this other parallel plane, because he's got up and he's explored the house and he's looked around. Well, everything looks almost the same, but there's some differences, right? I mean, he'll see the same pictures of the same family members, but things are a little out of kilter, right? Mm-hmm. And there are other times when he and others have been driving along, and say he's passing a strip mall that he passes every single day of his life, except this time it's not the same strip mall. Instead of like a Home Depot there, it's like some restaurant is there. And instead of like a Burger King there, it's like some other kind of establishment. And sometimes when he's had time, he's actually pulled into the parking lot, gotten out, walked around these stores, interacted with the people in the store, mm-hmm. and then got into his car and carried on with his errands for the day. And on the way back, things have morphed back into his our normal reality. I think what's happening is the veil between worlds, the membrane between worlds, is becoming thinner, mm-hmm. And more porous, and we're experiencing this bleed-through effect. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about too, because those people that have these metaphysical abilities, such as yourself, this is a tremendous opportunity, because even your average everyday people who don't really delve into the subjects or experience the stuff that we have they go dimension hopping at night just because they go to sleep, and their bodies, their astral bodies leave, and then they go dimension hopping, and they just think they've had an interesting night of dreams, but it's actually been more than that. Mm-hmm. And for people that are metaphysically inclined, I think that I know that there's a tremendous potential to make the most of this increase in frequency, and we need to ride this frequency wave. Mm-hmm. Because it's a frequency war, and they're hammering us with the frequencies of rage, of fear, yep. of lack of, right, of want, of neediness, so on and so forth. We have to counter that, and there's a lot of practical ways we could do that also.
Yeah,
we have to ride that frequency wave. We have to ride that frequency wave.
Excellent. We're going to head for a break real quick. We'll be right back. Everybody stay tuned, and we'll discuss that, James. Get back.